Hello, do you like New Japan Pro Wrestling? Are you a Shin Nihon freak? If so, check out the Super J-Cast with Joel and Damon on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
And even if you fucking hate New Japan Pro Wrestling, listen to the Super J-Cast anyway. Not just for our great show reviews, analysis, and pastrami sandwiches, but there's also usually some dick jokes somewhere in the obligatory opening 30 minutes of absolute nonsense we chat about every single week. That's the Super J-Cast for all the best talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling, crisps, and pornography.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Music of the Mat Remix on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. I am your host, Andrew Rich, and this is the first episode of 2025. Happy New Year, guys. And today I'm joined by a returning guest on the show. He is a contributor at Voices of Wrestling. It's JoJo Remy. Hello again, JoJo.
Hey, Andrew. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I mean, contributor is very,
loose.
Loose, yeah. I'm like basically the guy on the couch, but in the Slack at this point. If I think I basically pop in to comment on some goings on in the Japanese scene and talk about music, which is perfect, which is why I assume you asked me to be on, because music has really been more of my thing recently than wrestling. But yeah, I'm excited to get into this.
Yeah, it's good to have you back on for sure. It's been a while since you've been on the show. You're still living in Florida, I believe?
I am living in Tampa, yeah. We went to Japan last October, and it had this really weird feeling of like going home, which it's obviously not my home, but it's a place that feels like home to me still, and a place that I'll visit regularly. But I'm in my actual home of Florida, waiting for next hurricane season to see how we make it out.
I was going to ask, did you get through Helene and Milton in one shape? What was that like?
Yeah, relatively unscathed. A little bit of water damage in my house and a little bit of water damage in my office, but on the scale of the types of damage that I know people had and that I drive past regularly, it was, pretty insignificant. So lucky in that regard, and it's basically just a waiting game. So we'll do what we can to prepare, but we made it out okay this time.
That's good. I think for you, the bigger disaster has been the Miami Marlins performances. Oof. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so it's again on the scale of things. We've been so bad for so long. We made the playoffs 2 years ago, or not this most recent season, but the season before, and that that earns the team several years of goodwill in my book. But yes, it is exhausting. And, actually this past season, I lost some momentum. I still watched every game, but it was like a chore, which is, not a good sign, because I don't think we're going to be much better this year. So we will see. It's always the balance of Tampa wasn't particularly good this year, and they're obviously my local team now, but I can't kick those Marlins, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, as a Boston guy, we're also living on a lot of goodwill right now. But looking at the Patriots and the Sox and the Bruins lately, it's not been fun. Still have the Celtics, of course, but it's nice when all the teams are doing well. But
the Red Sox did a lot this offseason. I think they're going to be a lot better.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Again, fingers crossed we'll be back in the swing of things. No pun intended there. But anyway, today's episode here, JoJo, we are making some history, because this is not only the first artist-centric episode of Music of the Mat Remix. It's also the first pun-named episode of the new format, because this is called the Fab Four Horsemen. Yes, we are doing a Beatles episode. The Fab Four is, of course, a nickname for the Beatles, and the Four Horsemen is arguably the greatest stable in wrestling history. Beatles, arguably the greatest band in history. It all comes together there. Now, I don't think John, Paul, George, and Ringo ever did the four fingers pose that the Horsemen did, but you never know. But it's funny, JoJo, when I sent you a list of possible topics, I put this on the list thinking, JoJo likes the Beatles a lot. He'll probably pick this one. And then you messaged me back saying, I'm a bigger Beatles fan than a wrestling fan, right? So naturally, this was the one to go with. And Paul and Ringo just did a little mini reunion on stage in London a few weeks ago. So, it's timely as well.
Yeah, with a Rolling Stone, Ron Wood, as well. So, I think in terms of, contemporaries from the time that we're going to be talking about, there's few left that are still kicking, but Paul and Ringo are certainly still touring regularly and selling out venues, obviously, and it was cool to see Ron Wood. They also had I think it was in Mexico. They brought Jack White and Saint Vincent onto stage.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen Paul before, but his shows are incredible. I mean, the first time I saw him, I think it was 2003 or 2004. And just to set the tone for how big of a Beatles fan, I literally cried the whole concert. Like, not a little bit during some of my... I just cried the whole concert. That didn't happen in subsequent, concerts that I went to see him. I actually got to see him play in the Budokan, which... obviously a huge wrestling venue, but also where the Beatles played in Japan, and the Tokyo Dome, which is less of a cool music venue. But yeah, cried a ton, and huge Beatles fan.
Yeah, I mentioned a few episodes ago, my first concert ever was Paul McCartney at Fenway Park.
Wow.
So that was pretty damn cool. No tears on my part, but still, a really cool experience. Although I imagine Budokan Hall, just as incredible a sight. Thinking about Misawa, Kobashi, McCartney, all the legends, playing at Budokan. That must have been really damn cool. But
yeah, that was really cool. Real quick, I have a commemorative. You can see it in the little screenshot that it took of me. But there's a commemorative ticket that they handed out at that show. And the reason why they felt obligated to hand out that ticket is because he played 3 shows at the Tokyo Dome. Those sold out. So he said, okay, guess what? We'll announce another one at the Budokan. And like most concerts that are in high demand in Tokyo, it's a raffle. So you have to commit to buying the tickets before you know if you're going to get them. The previous shows, I think I paid the equivalent of about $80 per ticket, which is, not cheap, but not super expensive. And then, enter the raffle for the Budokan tickets. And then a charge hits my credit card for, let's just say, 10 times more than the Tokyo Dome tickets. And, I call up my wife. I'm like, look, I made a huge mistake. I got these tickets, but I didn't know they were going to be that expensive. I actually missed a zero in the yen to dollar conversion. But that being said, we obviously went to the show, and it was a unforgettable experience and worth every penny of that very expensive ticket. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm on record as a Paul guy, especially his solo stuff. But where do you stand with the band? Do you have favorites among the foursome?
I think for me, because the Beatles have been, not just my favorite band, but like my main interest since I was about 5. At various points in my life, each of the Beatles, Ringo included, have been my favorite Beatle. you know, I think if I had to pick one, I would probably pick John, but I don't have to pick one. So, I like them all, and I'll talk about what I like, in these songs, what I think, each of their strengths shines through the most in these songs that we're going to talk about. But yeah, gun to my head, I'd pick John, but yeah, it's a phase. I think more than anything, I like them all equally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're not my all-time favorite band ever, but it's still the Beatles. Like, they're still really, really great. I mean, that's my big, dumb summation right there. But that's kind of the difficulty in doing a topic like this, I think. A, because, what else is there to say about these guys that hasn't been covered already? It's well-covered ground. But also B, there's just too much to talk about, I think, just in terms of their historical significance to music and pop culture in general, their big catalog of all these great songs, and pioneering all these studio recording techniques and always trying to change up their sound, Beatlemania, just that whole thing, and the importance of people like George Martin and Brian Epstein. I mean, we could be here for 5 hours and barely scratch the surface. And the craziest thing, too, is, all that stuff took place within a decade. Like, leaving out the Quarrymen era and the Silver Beatles and Sutcliffe and Best and those guys, the Beatles, as we know them, were around for like 8 years and left that big a body of work and that big a mark on culture. It makes your head spin, JoJo, for sure.
It's crazy. And like, to think that, I talked about Ron Wood, but to think that the Rolling Stones, and, Paul's still playing, but obviously he's done different bands and stuff. The Rolling Stones are essentially the same band. Obviously there's different members, but the core is there. Mick and Keith. How long have they been around at this point? 70 years, 60 something years, right? So to think,
60 plus.
So to think that the Beatles were only really firing on all cylinders for about 8 years it's incredible. It's obviously amongst the most prolific and groundbreaking songwriting periods of any artist of all time, and just like the amount of progress that you get just from 63 to 68 is incredible, both sonically and artistically, in terms of lyrics and instrumentation. And the technology came a long way. I think when they started out, they were limited to 4 tracks, and when they finished up, that wasn't the case anymore. And just like the studio equipment obviously came a long way in that short period. But yeah, incredible, very condensed, very, very impressive period as a band.
Yeah, I think it kind of boldens their legacy even more, I think. The fact that they were able to accomplish just so much in so little time compared to a lot of other bands that, have been around for decades, like the Stones or the Who or whatever. It speaks to just how special, they were. It's kind of like how when you look up, Bryan Danielson or Will Ospreay on Cage Match, and you see all these great matches that they did within like the span of a year. It kind of puts into perspective just how, lucky we are to exist in the same time frame as these people and be able to, watch them in real time and all that stuff. And I wasn't alive to see the Beatles and Ed Sullivan or listen to Sgt. Pepper's when it came out, but I was alive to watch Bryan Danielson and Will Ospreay wrestle, including with each other. So, you got to appreciate greatness while you can, I guess, JoJo.
Yeah, and I think going back to my original point, like, the music is one thing, and obviously the biggest thing, but there's so much surrounding Beatles fandom, whether it's collecting memorabilia or just like the photographs of them that, there's a limited number, and they're obviously, a lot of them are in black and white. It's, there's a lot of, at least for me, kind of mysticism around the Beatles. So yeah, I think, in that way, it is kind of similar to wrestling fandom because, yes, there are some people who just watch the matches and then they're in and out and that's all they do, right? But there are some people who, like you and I, are more into it, and they make it a hobby. And I think for so many people, especially as really the first global rock sensation as a band, they did that for so many people across the world. So definitely more widespread than Danielson or Osprey, but I get the correlation there for sure.
Well, let's get to the music here. Obviously, we could have picked 40 songs each at minimum, but we're gonna save some time by not doing that. Instead, we have 8 songs each, and I have a played song at the end as well. JoJo, you are the guest. You will go first. What's your first pick?
So we're coming in hot with a B-side, which means the alternate side of a single. So it was the B-side of I Want to Hold Your Hand, and it was released in 1963. This comes in at a whopping 2 minutes and 16 seconds. It's This Boy.
That boy took my love away. He'll regret it someday. But this boy wants you back again. That boy isn't good for you, though he may want you to. This boy wants you back again. Oh, and this boy would be happy just to love you, but oh my.
Yeah, so for me, This Boy is a lot of what I love about the early Beatles. I think a lot of people, maybe our generation, I don't know if that's fair, but a lot of people who didn't grow up with the Beatles, I think, tend to overlook the early Beatles in terms of, being as cool as the mid or later period Beatles. But to me, this song is it's incredible, right? Like, it's a 3-part harmony almost throughout the whole song, other than the bridge. I can very, very proudly, I was going to say, whatever the opposite of proudly is, but very proudly say that I've learned all 3 parts of the 3-part harmony. It reminds me a lot of the Beach Boys song In My Room. It's got a little bit of that 50s flair to it, but the bass line is incredible. John's vocal, although it is a 3-part harmony, John's vocal is really one of my favorites in their whole catalog. And at the end of the bridge, when he hits that until you see him cry, or until she sees you cry, virtually screaming. It's a really strong example of how good of a vocalist he was. But yeah, that's all I got on this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm someone who prefers the later studio years of the band. That's actually where most of my picks come from. But I still like this stuff too. I'm not going to throw out the rest of the stuff just because it's not from my preferred era of the band. What's interesting about this one is John wanted to write a song in the style of Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, specifically a song called I've Been Good to You, which was his favorite Miracles song. And that song touches on the same themes as this one, which is a guy who's brokenhearted because his girl has left him. Very common theme, of course. So it's interesting how their music is just as influenced as it was influential there, JoJo.
For sure. And they covered You Really Got a Hold on Me, which was a Smokey and the Miracles song. And yeah, especially in the early years, you get these really obvious links to some main influences, right? For George, you get Carl Perkins and Chuck Berry, Those are the main two. Chet Atkins too. For Paul, you get Little Richard is one that I really associate him with. And for John, yeah, it's like Smokey Robinson and Buddy Holly for me. So yeah, that I definitely get that connection as well.
I liked looking up with some of these songs how many takes the Beatles did for them, because they did a lot of takes in their years. So many box sets and compilations of all these different takes. This one, 15 takes apparently. So a very simple song, I guess, in comparison to others. But when you want to get it right, you want to get it right there, JoJo, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think, as the studio became more of a playground for them, I think they spent a lot more time, like, wasted a lot of time, like trying to perfect stuff. And, some songs they literally never finished, right? That ended up being released as solo tracks because of that, striving for the unachievable perfection when, some of the songs that they banged out in a couple takes. So yeah, it doesn't always necessitate 105 takes or whatever, but yeah, I think that was definitely that period. It was more like get it on tape because we got to get back on tour. We got to write the next song, right? They're moving at such a rapid pace. So yeah.
All right, well, my first pick here, I'm going to jump ahead a few years to 1965. This is an album cut here. Rubber Soul is, of course, the album. And this is a John song. Great song here. This is Norwegian Wood, parentheses, This Bird Has Flown.
I once had a girl, or should I say, she once had me. She showed me her room, isn't it good, Norwegian wood. She asked me to stay and she told me to sit anywhere. So I looked around and I noticed there wasn't a chair. I sat on the rug, biding my time, drinking her wine. We talked until 2, and then she said, it's time for bed.
So yeah, the big thing about that song, of course, is it's the first time that George played a sitar on a Beatles song. I believe it's also the first time that any Western musician played an Indian instrument on a commercial record. Of course, this is around the time that the Beatles were getting really into Indian culture and Hindu culture and Ravi Shankar, all that stuff, and it's starting to play out here in their music. Later on, you would get Within You, Without You, another George song, being the biggest example of that. But the difference, I think, between this song and This Boy is it's striking, and it's only been a couple of years, but there's a real, big leap between the sounds of the two songs. These simple little pop and rock albums were only, again, 2 years earlier, so they're already growing and evolving there, JoJo.
Yeah. I can't pick a favorite Beatles album. It's really, really impossible, but I can pick two. And Rubber Soul is one of my favorites. My other favorite is Revolver. And, this period of the Beatles, let's say from Help to, you can say Sgt. Pepper's, but that's kind of its own thing. If you just say from Help to Revolver, to me, as a band, just the risks they were taking, trying to change from, all, in-your-face love songs, with simple lyrics to being a little bit more surreal and, not so on the nose, really shines through in this period. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of this song. I think there's a pretty big like Bob Dylan influence on the lyrics, the harmony when Paul comes in. You'll hear me talk about that a lot. Like, I'm a sucker for harmonies. I think their voices
Same, yeah.
blend so well together, and they still sound distinct, but they complement each other so well. And the other thing that strikes me about this one is, yes, there's this guitar, but there's also multiple acoustic guitars, which, they were, identified as a rock band, but it's, with Help and with Rubber Soul, you really see the acoustic guitar, more folk rock, as they call it, centric instrumentation. But yeah, this album to me really, I go back to it so much because I just love music in general from that period. I don't know which one was released first between Rubber Soul and Paint It Black, but obviously, that has, if not one of them inspired the other, right? Using the sitar. So yeah, great song, great album.
Mm-hmm. And it's a good example too of the darker, more sardonic side of the band, I think, because the song is purposely a little, vague, but it's supposed to be about John having an affair, which not the most uncommon thing for him, by the way. Trying to woo his lover into bed, and she won't give him any. And then in the morning she leaves, and he burns her house down. So it's a far cry from "I Want to Hold Your Hand" for sure. I mean, these guys, they could be sweet, they could be loving, but they had a dark, witty streak too. Especially John, I think, for sure. JoJo.
Yeah, I mean, when you go back and watch video footage of the band, to me, the single thing that resonates with me the most is the humor. Obviously, they're great musicians, and they wore cool clothes and stuff like that. But to me, their main characteristic as a group, in person, or not in person, but like when you see them interacting together, the thing that strikes me the most is the comedy, and that is, pervasive in a lot of their lyrics. But I think they were less afraid to lean into it in this period, and it shows with this song for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right, what's your next pick, JoJo?
So my next pick is also from 1963. I promise we will modernize eventually. And I've actually managed to trim 3 seconds off. So this song is a whopping 2 minutes and 13 seconds. It's off with the Beatles. It's All My Lovin'.
Close your eyes and I'll kiss you. Tomorrow I'll miss you. Remember, I'll always be true. And then while I'm away, I'll ride home every day, and I'll send all my loving to you. I'll pretend that I'm missing the lips I am missing, and hope that my dreams will come true. And then while I'm away, I'll ride home every day, and I'll send all my loving to you. All my loving I will send to you. All my loving, darling, I'll be true.
Wow, I mean, what can I say about this song? The walking bass line, one of the first things I learned one of the first things I decided I wanted to learn. It took me a little while when I started playing bass. The rhythm playing by John with all these weird voicings on the chords, incredible. Maybe in their entire catalog, the best rhythm guitar track. The guitar solo, straight out of a Carl Perkins song by George with his own twist, obviously. The double track lead vocal, which was, common at that time, but not as common as you would think. The harmony that comes in, and I think it's in the third verse. Yeah, I mean, this song to me, you'll hear me say this a couple times, but at one point this was my favorite song. And it so perfectly documents, early period Beatles as a rock band. I can picture, well, I don't think they ever played this, either in the Cavern or in Hamburg. That's the band I hear when I hear this song, really, really well oiled and really, complementing each other instrumentationally and, with the backing track really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like playing these early songs, I need to add like an MP3 of just screaming girls over the top of it, because you go back and watch clips of them playing these songs live, and those crowds are just screaming their heads off for these guys. They cannot get enough of them. I mean, it was called Beatlemania for a reason. Yeah, so, I think my favorite line in this song is, "I'll pretend that I'm kissing the lips that I'm missing," because he's essentially admitting to cheating on his girlfriend on the road there. So, yeah, that made me chuckle there for sure. But I will say this too. I played for us the mono mix of the song. How do you feel about the stereo mixing of these early songs? Because I don't really like it all that much. Like in headphones, It's very noticeable of the vocals on one side and the music on the other. And they get better at that later on, of course, but it's so jarring hearing, these early songs and hearing that stereo mix there, JoJo.
Yeah, I'm a mono guy for sure. Especially with, the UK versus US versions. I always go UK mono pretty much, especially on these earlier ones. When I when I record my own music, I try to do it as much as possible in mono, because I just like that limitation. I think it sounds, somehow you can get it to sound fuller if you do it right. So yeah, I'm definitely 100% mono.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, well, my next pick here, we are going to zip forward into the far future of 1970 to the last Beatles album, Let It Be. This is the end of the road for these guys here. I went with the George song on this one, and this is I Me Mine.
All through the day, I'm in mine, I'm in mine, I'm in mine. All through the night, I'm in mine, I'm in mine, I'm in mine. Now the frightened are leaving it, everyone's weaving it, coming on strong all the time. All through the day, I'm in mine. I me mine. I me mine. I me mine. I me mine. All I can hear, I'm in mine, I'm in mine, I'm in mine. Even those
So yes, that is convicted murderer Phil Spector on the production side there. Let It Be. Very interesting history there, because originally the guys recorded it under the name Get Back, and then Phil Spector came in and kind of took things over there. And the original version from the Get Back sessions, it was a lot shorter, and in this case he made it longer, and he also added the strings and the choir there during the verse section. So we talk about, the band changing its sounds between different, years and different eras. Here, there's a schism within the same song, between the verses, which are very sorrowful and lush and emotional, and there's, the organ and all that stuff, and the chorus, which is like this punchy, stomping hard rock anthem. So, George Martin obviously is going to be the producer for the Beatles. He'll always be the producer for the Beatles, but still, asking Phil Spector to, take the reins here and assemble the album is, pretty interesting move there, JoJo.
Yeah. And, you know, he produced All Things Must Pass, which was George's first solo record. He produced Imagine. Right, so he was definitely in their sphere. They were very friendly with the Ronettes, which was a group that he produced. So I think they were, you know, seeking that wall of sound. Obviously, Paul is a huge Beach Boys fan, and that's a similar flavor in terms of the production. This song doesn't really get the full Spectre treatment like some of the songs on Let It Be do. But yeah, I like this song a lot. Great lead guitar, great lyrics. Obviously, with the feel changing into that boogie woogie thing, it's a little jarring at first, but definitely cool. You know, what I love about George's songs is that you can really get a sense for where his head is at. You know, when like in terms of when the song was written, when it was released, kind of his state of mind. You know, this one, he's obviously like a bit moody, sad, pissed off, you know, all of it coming to an end. But yeah, my pro tip on Let It Be, well, there's two, I guess. It's definitely watch the Disney Plus documentary. It's incredible. And don't be intimidated by the 8 hours or whatever, because it's incredible. And then the other pro tip is that Let It Be Naked, which was released in the early 2000s, is like a stripped down mix of the album, and it's my preferred mix of it. So seek that out if you haven't heard it.
Yeah, you're right. You know, the end is nigh for sure, because this is literally the last song they ever recorded as a band, and John isn't on it. He's already gone by this point. So yeah, this is the end. And having it be about, you know, ego and selfishness, I, me, mine, like it's so fitting too to have that be the topic. But and not surprising either, given the state of things as well, you know. So but hey, look, they got a good song out of it. There is that silver lining at least there, JoJo.
Yeah, I mean, in that Let It Be documentary, you know, you feel George's pain, right? Like he brings something, and like it doesn't really get steam behind it. Obviously, like one of the greatest songs ever written would eventually be on Abbey Road. There's a scene in the movie where they're doing this song, and John and Yoko are just dancing while they're playing it, right? They're not like, John's literally not even paying attention, almost somewhat like mocking George as a songwriter, kind of giving him that like little brother treatment. But yeah, George would definitely, you know, his solo album, obviously this is a Beatles podcast, but All Things Must Pass, you know, really shows the backlog of excellent songs he had at this very time. You know, this was just the one he decided to put on Let It Be, or they allowed him to put on Let It Be, we'll say, or one of the ones he put on Let It Be. But yeah, great songwriter.
All right, what's your next pick, JoJo?
So, okay, we've got another B-side. This one came out in 1966. This is, you know, I told you that I would say a couple times that, you know, this one either was my favorite song, or this is my favorite song of all time. Unqualified, this is my favorite song. It's just 1 second over 3 minutes. This is Rain. Yeah. Well, I mean, incredible. Let's start with the bass playing. Like, people weren't doing this with a bass guitar before Paul McCartney. He changed how the instrument was being used. John Entwistle of The Who, super, super, super influential and groundbreaking as well, but this is lead bass playing. That's in terms of like the part he's playing. The bass tone on this song is my favorite bass tone of all time. There's some studio trickery going on this and Paperback Writer, I believe. Something to do with like, sending the recorded signal back through a speaker again or something like that. But it just produces this really rich sound. Paul, famous for using a Hofner bass, which is like a hollow body, short scale, looks like a violin. But at this time, starting with Rubber Soul the year before, he actually started using a Rickenbacker 4001S, which is, my favorite bass guitar. Obviously, George and John played primarily Rickenbacker guitars live, or maybe not primarily for George, but Paul never really played his with the Beatles live. He eventually played it with Wings. But yeah, this song, the harmonies, the bass playing, the rhythm guitar part, it's got this like weird tremolo on it. Really cool. The backwards vocal at the end, which is like, it's, I think in 2024 we can say like, well, yeah, it's kind of like cliche, but at the time, groundbreaking. I didn't even say the best part of this song. Ringo's drumming on this song. This is his best drumming part on any song.
He said it's his favorite drumming performance ever, too. So yeah,
for sure. I mean, it's just this is it for me, man. This is the sound that I want everything. Like if every song had some bit of Rain in it, it would be a better song. So yeah, to me, this is my favorite song. And this is, for me, this is the best example of the Beatles at their strongest, which is this mid period that I talked about before. So I'll stop rambling for now.
Yeah, I mean, for a song about people complaining about the weather, it's quite radical because you're mixing psychedelic rock with Indian music. There's a droning quality to it. It sounds really dense and distorted a lot of times. And yeah, there's the reverse vocals at the end. One of the first times that ever happened in pop music as well. So yeah, even their B-sides are landmark songs. It's kind of unfair, I think, to a lot of other bands that they can just do this and just make an album. It's just a B-side, but that's kind of the level of talent and the level of craft and innovation that we're talking about here, JoJo, with these guys.
Yeah, and the way that they used the singles from a marketing perspective was, as a lead into the album, right? So this Paperback Writer and Rain is kind of like the thing that came out right before Revolver. We Can Work It Out and Day Tripper was the thing that came out right before Rubber Soul. Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane was the thing that came out right before Sgt. Pepper's, right? So, I think it's a different tactic to put your best songs, to not put your best songs on the albums. And best songs are obviously, subjective, but it was a tactic for them to say like, okay, this is what this next album is going to sound like. And again, just like in the context of what rock sounded like in '66, this was groundbreaking. Actually, there's a book called Beatles '66, which I read recently, maybe last year, which goes through like month by month, what the Beatles did and kind of like the influences that were around them and, where they were at in terms of, their state of mind in '66. So as this is my favorite year of my favorite band, it's only fitting that there's a book about it. So yeah, highest recommendation on that one as well.
Mm-hmm. And I did find this funny. There are two different stories about how the backwards vocals came about. George Martin said he came up with it because he was just playing around with the tape and, it just kind of happened. John said he came up with it because he took the tape home one day after a recording session and he was stoned off his gourd on hash. And he put the tape on backwards by mistake and he liked it. I think I like John's story better there.
For sure.
There, JoJo.
For sure,
So,
yeah. I mean, there's again, that mysticism around the band. A lot of these stories that I first heard of in the Beatles anthology mini-series or whatever it is. But yeah, it's, you want to always pick the more dramatic and, band member centric story. While I certainly, have full confidence that George Martin could have done it, I just like thinking that it was John's idea.
All right, my next pick here, the year 1968. Things are tense with the band, things are fraught. What do? I know, a double album. That'll help things. And we get the Beatles. We get their self-titled album, aka The White Album, as it's better known. And I went with the opening track here. This is Back in the USSR.
Been away so long, I hardly knew the place. Gee, it's good to be back home. Leave it till tomorrow to unpack my case. Honey, disconnect the phone. I'm back in the USSR. You don't know how lucky you are, boy. Back in the US, back in the US, back in the USSR. Well, the Ukraine girls really knocked me out. They leave the West behind. And Moscow girls make me sing and shout. And Georgia's always on my mind. Hey, I'm back in the USSR. You don't know how lucky you are, boy. Back in the USSR.
So that's actually one of my favorite Beatles songs ever. I love that so much, and there's a lot to love about it. I mean, the lyrics are a hoot. Flew in from Miami Beach, BOAC. Didn't get to bed last night. On the way, the paper bag was on my knee. Man, I had a dreadful flight. Show me around your snow-peaked mountains way down south. The speed of it, the jingle-jangle piano, the hand claps, George's guitar solo, Paul's just screaming one-note guitar solo over the final verse, and of course, most famously, I think, just the whole Beach Boys parody of it all, with well, the Ukraine girls really knock me out, woo-woo! It's just a really, really fun song, and it's a great opener, too, for an album. Definitely a Paul song, too. This is right up his alley, JoJo, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. You feel the Beach Boys for sure, the Chuck Berry influence as well. This is the first time that it was mentioned that Paul plays guitar on some Beatles songs, obviously. You and I would know that. Not sure if the listeners are aware of that. But excellent guitar player. He plays when now, if you see him. But he was as early as Help, I think, just ripping guitar solos. Obviously, he didn't start as the band's bass player. As you briefly talked about Stu, he was their original bassist. But yeah, in terms of the song, again, the harmonies are great. The guitar tone on this one is really excellent. And just, the Beach Boys thing is one that I always think about too.
Mm-hmm. And this is another one where only 3 Beatles play on it, because this was during a time when Ringo had quit the band briefly during the sessions, because Paul, I guess, was harsh about his drumming, and he was just tired of all the tension, and he left. So the other guys just cobbled together a drum track, and, it's do a pretty good job of it, because, Paul could play the drums too.
Yeah.
That all these guys were very talented beyond just their own, instruments. And as well, as you can imagine, with a title and subject matter like this, when it came out, they were accused by people of being pro-Soviet, because those people didn't realize that this song is meant to be a parody of Chuck Berry's, Back in the USA. And there was also a political campaign in the UK at the time called I'm Backing Britain, back in the USSR. Like, the whole thing is satire. But it just flew over people's heads there, JoJo, as has happened with, like, Born in the USA and other songs like that, JoJo.
Yeah, you're right. The comedy really shines through in this one. And that's a theme, a recurring theme, as you kind of watch these documentaries and stuff, like people misinterpreting either their intentions or adding meaning to stuff that's not really there, or just, having a fit over something because that's what people tend to do. So the Beatles, were on the receiving end of that kind of outrage quite a bit in their career.
Mm-hmm. All right, what is next for us there, JoJo?
So I mentioned that 1966 was my favorite year of the Beatles, and we've got an album track here from Revolver. It's a George Harrison song. It's called I Want to Tell You. Yeah, so for me, this one is about a couple things. For me, around this period, John and George both got Fender Stratocasters, which is a famous solid body electric guitar. One that they were both always wanting. I think primarily because of that's what Buddy Holly played, but couldn't afford. In the early days of the band. But, for, I think, Help, which was the year before, they got matching Sonic Blue, which is a pale white blue Stratocaster, which I also have a Sonic Blue Stratocaster for that same reason. And this song, there's kind of two Strat tones to me that matter. One is like the Hendrix thing, which this is not, obviously, and then the other one is like the Buddy Holly thing, and this one is that. So this one just screams Strat to me. Again, Paul's playing the Rickenbacker bass, really doing some, again, really cool stuff with his bass line. I feel like I'm talking a lot about like the music, but this song has a diminished chord, which is not common in pop music. So George is really coming into his own as a songwriter with this one. And to me, it's like, it's all about the tension and release, right? There's like, it almost sounds dissonant at one point, but that bridge is really strong and it resolves. So, this is one of my favorite George songs. Again, he wears his heart on his sleeve, as it were, with the lyrics. And, the nugget I'll throw out is, I don't know if you've ever seen the Concert for George, but there's a great cover of that with the house band where Jeff Lynne of ELO is doing the lead vocal, a bandmate of George's in Traveling Wilburys. And it's a great performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I listen to this, the word that comes to mind is just odd. It's an odd song. Most songs have a fade out. This has a fade in. And there's, this weird little herky-jerky guitar riff. It doesn't sound smooth. It sounds kind of awkward. Even the piano sounds disconcerting. Da-na-da-na-na-na-na. It's off. But when you have a song like this, which is about problems with communicating, it makes sense then that it would be, off in a manner of speaking there, JoJo, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great observation. I don't know that I never really noticed that fade in as opposed to fade out, but that's a good point. The Strat's the first thing you hear, but it is kind of, not a conventional way to start a song. But yeah, I think the herky jerky kind of like frolicking nature of the rhythm is pretty unique. And, I think for George, he obviously would end up writing some of the most memorable, most popular songs. We talk about Something or like, Here Comes the Sun. But this was him coming into his own, kind of like working through getting a song or two on each album. I think this is the only, non-double album where he gets 3 songs. But yeah, this is a unique one for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, when you start experimenting with LSD, you're going to get unique, with your music for sure. And just, branching out and doing weird stuff. And that will come into play later on as well, for sure, with some of our picks there, JoJo. But, all right, so my next pick here, 1967, there was a TV film called Magical Mystery Tour. And when they put the album out of the same name, side 1 was songs from the album, and side 2 was singles that they had not put on other albums, and they just put them on this one. So you've got Hello Goodbye, you've got I Am the Walrus, Strawberry Fields Forever, which you mentioned earlier, and you have this one. This is a song that is about me, because it's called Baby, You're a Rich Man.
How does it feel to be one of the beautiful people? How often have you been there? Often enough to know. What did you see when you were there? Nothing that doesn't show. Baby, you're a rich man. Baby, you're a rich man. Baby, you're a rich man too. You keep all your money in a big brown bag inside a zoo. Not a thing to do. Baby, you're a rich man. Baby, you're a rich man. Baby, you're a rich man too.
So yeah, I looked up the backstory of this one. I guess it's a case of the Beatles being ironic, because despite the title and the lyrics and all that, it's meant to be about how, being rich isn't about money, it's about what's inside that counts. Even though the Beatles have a lot of money, for sure. The most, I think, lasting thing about this song, though, is that instrument you hear, that... I was like, what is that thing? And I looked it up. It's called clavioline. I think that's how you say it. It's an early version of a synth. John played it on the oboe setting. So it kind of sounds, Eastern, but it's actually not. So another case of irony there, I suppose, JoJo.
Yeah, I always thought it sounded a little bit like a bagpipe.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, the other thing about this song for me, in terms of the instrumentation, is just how bass forward it is, right? There's not much of a guitar part to speak of. There is a kind of rhythm piano part, but it's very bass forward. The bass does some pretty interesting things, holding whole notes and, backing off, but then getting a lot busier in sections. So yeah, I like this one a lot. I don't think I've mentioned this to you, and certainly the listeners never heard this before, but my dad, in his, days as a solo musician, covered this song, and I have a recording of it. I'll send it to you one of my kind of main connections to the song is that I hear my dad when I hear it. But yeah, one of my favorites for sure. And I think there's, and my song is also part of this. There's some of these songs in this like 67, really in 67, that, and some of them ended up getting released much later, that have kind of an evolution in terms of the instrumentation that you would hear on Revolver. Obviously, Sgt. Pepper's was a lot more production involved. But if you just strip that away and just look at them as a 4-piece band, there's some pretty cool sonic things going on. There's a very weird guitar part in this that's kind of sparse. But yeah, at their heart, just a rock and roll band.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember the first time I heard this song, it was the ending of The Social Network, where Jesse Eisenberg, as Mark Zuckerberg, he sends a friend request to an ex-girlfriend of his, and he keeps refreshing the page to see when she accepts it. And he's refreshing and refreshing, and the last image is his face and the words on the screen that say, Mark Zuckerberg is the youngest billionaire in the world. And then it hard cuts to black. Baby, you're a rich man. Baby, you're a rich man. I'll never forget that ending. It sticks with me to this day, JoJo. So yeah.
Do they use the Beatles version, or is it a cover?
Oh yeah. I'll bring this up later on, but not cheap to get the Beatles music in your projects for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. That was the same point I was going to make, is that a lot of times in movies, it's a cover that's used, right, because of the price tag associated with getting the real thing in the movie.
Right. All right, JoJo, what is your next pick for us?
So we're going to jump back to Rubber Soul here with another album track. To me, this one is kind of like the Beatles' best attempt at a Motown Stax song. And this is a Paul song, one where he actually plays guitar. It's You Won't See Me.
You won't see me. I don't know why you should want to hide, but I can get through. My hands are tied. I won't want to stay. I don't have much to say, but I get turned away, and you won't see me. You won't see me. You won't see me. You won't see me. Time after time, you refuse to even listen. I wouldn't mind if I knew what I was missing, though the days are few, they're filled with tears.
Yeah, so for me, this one, I always end up talking about the bass, but to me here, I hear a lot of James Jamerson, Duck Dunn bass playing. That's why I mentioned Motown and Stax. The original intention, so they wanted to go to record, I think it was, I forget which one, it was Rubber Soul or Revolver, but they wanted to go to Memphis to record, but you could hear that they were listening to, things like Otis Redding, things like Booker T and the MGs, that James Jamerson type of bass line's really, in this. Paul also plays guitar on it. The background vocals are pretty interesting, not just echoing the main vocal, but, throwing in some different lyrics. Has a cool piano part. But yeah, this is, I think a good snippet of what the Beatles were inspired by in 1965, and a kind of a good example of them, using those influences to do their own thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this song is like half diss track and half desperate plea, because I guess Paul wrote this after a fight with his girlfriend, Jane Asher, and she wouldn't pick up the phone when he called her. When I call you up, your line's engaged. I have had enough, so act your age. Time after time, you refuse to even listen. Like, he's clearly mad at her, but also he wants her back, like a lot. Though the days are few, they're filled with tears. And since I lost you, it feels like years. Yes, it seems so long, girl, since you've been gone, and I just can't go on if you won't see me. So, again, going beyond just a simple love song, there's some, complex feelings here. Very, complex topic there, JoJo.
Yeah, he was definitely going through some relationship issues around Rubber Soul. You get to hear that kind of, angst in some of Paul's lyrics for sure around that time. I'm looking through you. A lot of those, you read a lot of those, lyrics are kind of targeted at Jane Asher, and I think it's only fair that like the goings on of their day-to-day life would seep into their lyrics, even if they are the biggest rock band in the world. So yeah, I think you really get to hear that for the first time, I think, from Paul on Rubber Soul.
Mm-hmm. And for those wondering, Paul and Jane reconciled after this and got engaged. And then she walked in on him when he was allegedly stooping another woman. And that was the end of that. So it wasn't just John who liked to canoodle around there, JoJo, that's for sure. So, yeah.
Again, I think that goes with the territory of being the biggest band in the world,
yep.
I guess.
It just, look, it's not surprising, not at all, yeah. But okay, my next pick here, we have a Ringo song in our midst. He only wrote 2 Beatles songs, Don't Pass Me By on the White Album. But I picked this one, his much more popular song here. This is from Abbey Road, and this is, of course, Octopus's Garden.
I'd like to be under the sea in an octopus's garden in the shade. We would be warm below the storm in our little hideaway beneath the waves, resting our head on the seabed in an octopus's garden near a cave. We would sing and dance around because we know we can't be found. I'd like to be under the sea in an octopus's garden in the shade.
So one of the longest running jokes in music is, mocking and dumping on Ringo. Peace and love, don't send any more fan mail, peace and love. But I want to show some appreciation for the guy, and this song as well, because it's a delightful song. It's so playful and inviting. It's about escaping the troubles of the world and being happy and free. It has that little country tinge too, because Ringo's a big country fan there. So yeah, I want to stick up for Mr. Starkey here because he wrote just a wonderful little song, JoJo.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you. This is one of my favorite Beatles songs by anybody. To me, Abbey Road is still the best sounding, best produced album in existence, which is crazy because, they had so much back and forth with Let It Be. But Abbey Road it sounds so good. And this song is no exception. The country thing, you can definitely hear it in George's guitar playing too. I believe he's using a Telecaster. It sounds like a Telecaster to me. He had one around that time. There's a part in that Let It Be documentary where, I think it's called Get Back, where George is actually helping Ringo with the lyrics and kind of what the chords are. So you kind of see that creative process in action, which is really cool. But yeah, this is a great song, and it's I would say it's Ringo's best.
Yeah, this is again written during Ringo's brief exit from the band, and it's kind of about getting away from a bad situation and living under the waves, away from the problems and away from the tumult. So there you go. And apparently he was on Peter Sellers' yacht of all places, like eating seafood, and the boat captain told him about how octopi build these gardens in the sea with like stones and shiny objects, and that's how he got the song. So, it's certainly one of the lighter Beatles songs of this time period for sure, but I still love it a lot, and I love Ringo too. I give no shade to him whatsoever. I like his singing voice. He's a great drummer too. Like, he's not going crazy on the kit, mind you, but still, the feel of his drumming, it works so well. And if you ask, any drummer, chances are they'll tell you that Ringo's a great drummer too. So, God bless Ringo. Still with us, still making music, still touring out there. He's the oldest Beatle as well too, which is amazing. So, nothing but love for Ringo there, Jojo.
Yeah, I think he drums sparingly these days. I think he spends a lot of time kind of being the front man, deservedly so. But yeah, he is an excellent drummer. I'd be hard pressed. I could name some other drummers that I like a lot. Actually, funny story. His son Zach Starkey is also a drummer.
He was in The Who, yeah.
He was in The Who, and he was in Oasis. Hopefully he'll be with Oasis when I see them next summer. But he did not learn how to play the drums from his dear dad. He learned how to play the drums from Keith Moon, a great friend of Ringo's. But yeah, Ringo is a great drummer, and you constantly hear drummers talk about how great he is, and it's well-deserved for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right, Jojo, what is your next pick of the day?
Okay, so now we're going to 1967. We've got the longest song, I believe, of any that I've picked, unless I've miscalculated. This is one that wasn't released until 1969 on the soundtrack for Yellow Submarine. This is another George song. This is It's All Too Much. I really like the juxtaposition here between like the fairly simple vocal melody and the crazy guitar feedback that's going on in the background. George at this time, or in '67, he had given up playing guitar, right? He basically switched to being a sitar player, and you hear that a lot on Sgt. Pepper's. And that I think is why Paul ended up playing a lot of the guitar on Sgt. Pepper's. But this one, it's got feedback. It's like a very guitar-centric song, which, it's another juxtaposition. George was trying to get away from the guitar, but then he did this song with very guitar forward. So obviously this is, not one of their hits by any means or anything like that, but you mentioned the influence of LSD. You hear it.
Oh, yeah.
You hear it here for sure. One of the things that always sat with me the first time I saw that Beatles anthology documentary was that George, he was looking basically for the meaning of life with LSD, right? And he said, like, it basically just like put rope in my brain is the quote that sits with me, right? Like it was definitely a misguided, attempt to get something more than just, high. And I think it did kind of alter his way of thinking for sure, but it can be a bit overwhelming as evidenced by these lyrics. So I think, it was definitely kind of the fad of the time, in '67, Summer of Love, a lot of people experimenting with LSD. but you hear it here. But to me, this is really about the guitar and the vocal melody.
Yeah, I'm freaking out, man. It's all too much, man. Like, the acid is fully kicked in here. And yeah, George literally wrote this song about the psychedelic experience, in the late 60s, Summer of Love vibe. Yeah, these lyrics, floating down the stream of time from life to life with me, makes no difference where you are or where you'd like to be. Sail me on a silver sun where I know that I'm free. Show me that I'm everywhere and get me home for tea. That is a man who is straight up vibing, JoJo. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's basically like "Come Sail Away," right? Like he wants to go on a fantastic voyage, as it were. And I think some people end up getting that from doing hallucinogenics, and some people just go crazy. And hopefully, thankfully, George was able to recover from that. But like I said before, he really, while it was a fad of the time, he really spoke about it with kind of not disdain, but just like, we were young and we did stupid stuff. So yeah, that's what sits with me about the whole LSD thing. But yeah, cool song anyway.
Mm-hmm. And it definitely affected the length too, because I think this is the fourth longest song they ever did, only surpassed by Hey Jude, I Want You, She's So Heavy, and Revolution 9. Because yeah, they kept most of their songs really short. Like, even when they just became a studio band, they're still only in like the 2.5, 3 minute range, somewhere around there on average. But yeah, they just George just said, you know what, I'm going with this one here for 6.5 minutes, and yeah, so there you go.
Yeah, and I don't think this this was not intended for any sort of commercial success, right? This was more experimentation, or kind of a leftover song too. Didn't come out till 2 years later, which is unheard of with like the pace with which they were working. So yeah, it's kind of a leftover, but it's a cool one.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go back to Revolver with my next pick here. This is the last track on the album. Another John song here. This is Tomorrow Never Knows. So yes, the acid trip continues with that song. I said on the previous episode, I'm not a fan of things like post-rock and stuff that gets a little too experimental. The great thing about the Beatles is that, for the most part, even their experimental stuff is still, accessible. Like this song, there's all of these overdubs and loops and drones and effects, and they feed John's vocals through like a speaker cabinet at one point, talking about turn off your mind, relax and float downstream, surrender to the void, listen to the color of your dreams. Like, to quote Danny DeVito in Always Sunny, they're getting real weird with it. But it's still, I think, very enjoyable and catchy there, JoJo.
Yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite songs. I'm glad you picked it. When I think about this song, I think about the lyrics and the vocal. It's John. It's very, it's influenced by the Tibetan Book of the Dead, about your ego dying and surrendering to, yourself, basically. But then the music, I think Paul doesn't really get enough credit for the music on this song. I think it was his idea to do all this kind of like tape loop manipulation, which is a lot of these sounds that you hear in the background that kind of, sound like seagulls or something like that. The guitar solo, which comes from Taxman, but it's flipped backwards, is also Paul playing the guitar again. So sonically, it's very influenced by Paul, but lyrically and, the vision of the song is very John. I always I heard the story that, John wanted two things. Either he wanted to sound like a Tibetan monk yelling at the top of a mountain, or the way that he was going to achieve the sound that he wanted was by tying a rope around his waist and hanging from the top of the studio in Abbey Road, which obviously is not what they did. But the thing that they ended up with is to me, it doesn't sound dated at all, which is, if you listen to most music from the mid-'60s, that's 60s music. But to me, maybe I'm a biased listener, but to me, this sounds as fresh as anything you'll ever hear.
Yeah, this is the consequence of, giving up touring. You don't have to worry about replicating this song on stage because you're not going on stage anymore. You can focus on harnessing the power of the studio and just making whatever the hell you want. There's a freedom of that. I mean, you can get, a little too lost in the sauce at times, perhaps, like in this case where they just go crazy. But still, if you want to be super creative and not have to worry about replicating guitar sounds and replicating loops and worrying about, playing tapes on stage, forget on stage. Just be in the studio. And they did, and they were still super successful, JoJo.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think that it's a perfect end to Revolver because of the groundbreaking nature of it. It comes like, it reminds me of like the Shinkansen, right? Like the rail in Japan, the high-speed rail. It's like so, of a unique time, and it seems so out of place, but when it passes you, you're like, oh, what was that? And that's kind of how I think about Revolver. It's just being like, even, decades old, still feeling futuristic today, which is something that I love about the album so much.
Mm-hmm. And I talked about this with Baby You're a Rich Man. I remember when Mad Men used this song in an episode. That was a huge deal because forget movies. You rarely ever heard the Beatles songs in a TV show.
Yeah.
Because, it's so expensive to license it. But this was used during like an end montage of an episode where Don Draper gets the album and puts it on. And which is funny because it's the last song on the album. Like, he's skipping right to the end. What are you doing, Don? But yeah, this is another Beatles song that I just love so much, despite how, weird it is, JoJo.
Yeah, for sure. This is the one like that I wish you could hear live, right? Because, music technology has come so far. When I saw Paul, I think the first time I saw him, he played Mr. Kite. I think it was the first time it was
I saw him play that too, yeah.
I think that tour was the first time it had ever been played live, and that has some crazy stuff going on too. And this is one like in that alternate reality where John's still touring in 2024. I feel like this is on the set list, and this is like amazing.
Well, there's this tribute band called the Fab Faux, F-A-U-X, and they actually perform these, later studio-only albums on stage. And they do a pretty damn good job of recreating them, too. Minus the vocals, which are their own. But there's a story, I think, of McCartney talking to them once, and he's like, do you guys do Tomorrow Never Knows? And they said yes, and that's how he knew they were the real deal. Because if you can do that song on stage, you can do pretty much anything on stage, I think. So, the Fab Faux, I recommend people check them out because they're really good. So, yeah.
Yeah, the other thing is like, these things that like so many people have studied and, mimicked and learned backwards and forwards, literally in this case. It was more or less, accidents in the studio, right? Like they didn't know how things were going to turn out. So that, spontaneity and that happenstance of how like some of these songs turned out is, one of the most remarkable things about them is that not only was like the technology new and the things that they were doing in the studio new, but like the performance being recorded or the thing being compiled, right? It seems to me like there was a one shot at they were going to nail it, and they nailed it so many times. Or sometimes they had to do 108 takes, but that studio mastery is so impressive to me.
Mm-hmm. All right, what's your next pick here, JoJo?
So I believe we are going to the most recent, as we can call it, Beatles song on my list. Another one from Abbey Road. This is a Paul song, and this is one that's kind of in the middle of the medley in Abbey Road. So, it was hard for me to pick one song, but I decided to go with under 2 minutes. Actually, most of the songs in the medley are under 2 minutes. Just yep. Under 2 minutes, 1:59. She came in through the bathroom window.
Oh, look out! She came in through the bathroom window, protected by a silver spoon. But now she sucks her thumb and wonders by the banks of her own lagoon. Didn't anybody tell her? Didn't anybody see? Sundays on the phone to Monday, Tuesdays on the phone to me. She said she'd always been a dancer. She worked at 15 clubs a day. And though she thought I knew the answer, well, I knew what I could not say.
Oh, the syncopation is so crazy. I mean, the strut, the vibe of this song, it's so unique. And when you pair that with just the perfection in terms of the recording technique that was used on Abbey Road, to me, this is like sonically, maybe not as a song in terms of like its weight, but just in terms of how good it sounds. This might be the best Beatles song to me. The harmonies are so full. The guitar is so cutting. The bass is so in your face, and that line is so syncopated with the drums. This is kind of just buried in the second half of Abbey Road, but I think it's a perfect example of what later period Beatles sounds like and how pretty a rock band can sound when it's recorded the right way.
Yeah, Abbey Road is my favorite Beatles album, hands down. Come Together, Something, Here Comes the Sun, Because, Oh Darling, You Never Give Me Your Money, which is another one of my favorite Beatles songs. Like, even when the majority of side 2 is a medley of songs that aren't finished, it's still great. Like, even their scraps still work. And, yeah, like, it's amazing how this band that is, like, on the verge of collapsing can still make this album that is so incredible and so well put together, despite the fact that, yeah, again, most of these songs aren't done, but it still works. Like, the sheer talent and the sheer force of will to make an album this good in spite of all the BS is incredible, JoJo.
Yeah, and Let It Be came out after Abbey Road, but it was recorded before mostly, or maybe exclusively, and I think Abbey Road was kind of like their last. Okay, Let It Be didn't turn out great. We're definitely going to be calling it quits, but let's go in and, have a good send-off. It sounds so, like, I just go back to how good it sounds. Like, maybe Dark Side of the Moon is, it came out a couple years later and it sounds amazing. It was recorded in the same studio, I think, at least partially. But, I think Abbey Road is still like the best sounding rock album, which is crazy. But yeah, the other thing I think about this, I name dropped John Entwistle earlier, but when I hear this bass line in this song, it reeks of John Paul Jones to me. I don't know, like, if John Paul Jones heard this and ripped it off. I don't think that's possible, just because he was already doing stuff in the first Led Zeppelin record that's similar to this. But that syncopation, I guess it comes from James Jamerson, but Paul obviously is a renowned songwriter and band leader and singer, but to me, he's the best bass player ever, and this is an example of that.
Mm-hmm. You bringing up Dark Side, that reminded me of a common link between that album and Abbey Road, which is Alan Parsons. Famously, of course, of the Alan Parsons Project, but he was an audio engineer on both of those albums. Like, the reason they sound so good is in part because of him, because, having a good producer like George Martin in there is key, but so is having a good sound engineer. You need that too. So, a big, shout out to Alan Parsons for his work on Abbey Road, for sure. JoJo.
For sure. And there's a couple of engineers and not George Martin people that worked on Beatles albums that ended up producing some of the best sounding records ever, right? Ken Scott was an engineer on Revolver. He produced David Bowie's albums, right? He produced Ziggy Stardust, which if not Abbey Road or Dark Side, I might say that Ziggy Stardust is the best sounding rock album ever. Jeff Emmerich was a producer or an engineer who went on to produce records. Pretty sure he produced Imperial Bedroom by Elvis Costello, which is another amazing sounding record. They were the best band ever, but they also had the best people working on the records to make them sound as good as possible.
Yeah, Glenn Johns, who also worked with the Stones and the Who and Zeppelin and all those bands. It's not just the foursome. It's other people help too, and that's a key thing to remember there for sure. Yeah. But okay, this is my second to last pick here, and it is another Revolver song. Here we go, more Revolver. This is a Paul song, and this is For No One.
Your day breaks, your mind aches. You find that all her words of kindness linger on when she no longer needs you. She wakes up, she makes up, she takes her time and doesn't feel she has to hurry. She no longer needs you, and in her eyes you see nothing. No sign of love behind the tears cried for no one. A love that should have lasted years. You want her, you need her, and yet you don't believe her when she says her love is dead. You think she needs you. And in her eyes you see nothing. No sign of love behind the tears cried for no one.
So there are even fewer Beatles on that one. It's only Paul and Ringo doing that song, and a guy named Alan Civil on the French horn there too. Another just amazing song, so beautiful and heartbreaking. In her eyes you see nothing. No sign of love behind the tears cried for no one. A love that should have lasted years. Not just that she doesn't love him anymore, it's the fact that he's also taking it really hard and having a hard time accepting it too. You want her, you need her, and yet you don't believe her when she says her love is dead. You think she needs you. Really deep stuff. I know people have talked about this song as like being one of Paul's most mature songs during this time period. And I agree, again, talking about, songs like this, songs like, You Won't See Me. It's not just your standard, teeny bopper song. It's pretty serious stuff, JoJo.
Written at the ripe old age of 23 or 24.
Yeah. Again, this guy's not, 68 when he wrote this song. He's in his early 20s. It's crazy.
Yeah, this is a great song. It doesn't rock at all, right? It's basically somewhere between classical and pop. I think it inspired a genre of things like, albums like Odyssey and Oracle by the Zombies. I hear a lot of like Ray
A lot
Davies.
of Baroque pop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of like Ray Davies, like observational writing in it. It sounds very, very British to me, which is like not something that they really strived to do, right? They tried to sound American. But this one, it was obvious that they were British. We talk about, how good Abbey Road sounds, but Revolver is like right there with it. Recorded with a lot cruder equipment, even though it was only recorded, a couple of years before. But yeah, this is a beautiful song for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Beatles, they're definitely known for their love songs. I think they wrote just as many breakup songs too. This, Yesterday, You Won't See Me, Ticket to Ride, Long and Winding Road, and many, many more. So, yeah, these guys were emo before emo, I think, JoJo.
Yeah.
These songs.
And I really, in my mind, I know that it's not on the same album, but I pair this song with She's Leaving Home, which is on Sgt. Pepper's, a very similar style that, it's really just those two songs, and, Paul created a genre, basically. So just a testament to like how they'd like dip their toes in one sound from song to song, and like people just hang on to that, and it inspires so many musicians around the world.
Mm-hmm. All right, what is your last pick for us there, JoJo?
So we're going back to the White Album, 1968. I'm not, I could have picked a couple of different songs, but what I was going for here was, John Lennon has this thing that he's able to convey with his, whether it's how he sings, or there's this like kind of languid, sleepy, exhausted, somewhat surreal, psychedelic quality to his voice. And this song has it, but it also has great harmonies by the rest of the band. And then he has a part in it where he's screaming, which is something that he's also really good at. So this is from the White Album, and this is Happiness is a Warm Gun.
I need a fix 'cause I'm going down to the bits that I left uptown. I need a fix 'cause I'm going down. Mother Superior jumped the gun. 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 Happiness is a warm gun. Happiness is a warm gun, mama. When I hold you in my arms and I feel my finger on your trigger, I know nobody can do me no harm. Because
Yeah, it's got this like kind of doo-woppy background vocal with some like nasty, fuzzy lead guitar, which doesn't seem like it would fit, but it does. And some real surreal lyrics, which if you haven't caught on by now, that's something that I like a lot. But yeah, this is one that, the White Album has so many songs on it. But this one is the one that I always go back to, and just, I feel like it captures a sound that I wish more things sounded like.
Yeah, when I mentioned earlier, all the takes that they would do for songs, this took 70 takes to put together, because there's 3 sections in one song, all these different time changes as well. It's like the Beatles going prog rock, and that would pop up again in other songs in their catalog too. Like I mentioned, You Never Give Me Your Money, there's different sections in that song. And if you go to later on with Wings and Band on the Run, that's 3 songs in one. Or Uncle Albert / Admiral Halsey, You know? So, yeah, you can see why there's tension in the band. Like, it's not just because of personal strife, but you have, you know, the pressure of getting these songs right. It's not just a couple chords and I saw her standing there. There's, you know, a lot more going on here, JoJo.
For sure. And when they're recording the White Album, a lot of times it wouldn't be, most times it wasn't all four of them in the room at the same time throughout the whole process, right? Early albums, they basically could do it in a couple takes because they knew the song back and forwards, and they were all in the room and you were capturing a live performance. But there were so many overdubs happening and so many, they're literally using different studios at the same time recording different songs, right? So it ends up with a much more disjointed product. But I think that's also, you know, if you think about the story, their career arc, right? Like the wheels were starting to come off, right? This was, you know, it sounds silly to say because it's one of the best albums ever, right? But this was the beginning of the end. And I think the disjointed nature of it is a real, you know, sign that was going to come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, overall, I am not a huge fan of the White Album. I don't think it's all that great. I like half the songs on it. Other half I can do without. So yeah, if this was like one album of like 15 songs or whatever that I like the most, I like it a lot more. But as it stands, I prefer other albums over this one for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely got some filler, as it were, on it. You know, things like Revolution 9 and Wild Honey Pie are certainly, you know, not the catchy pop songs that the Beatles are known for. But like you said, it's got some real gems on it, and I think, you know. You start to hear like that, basically the solo songs from each member, which is something there, you know, that you would have had to deal with as a Beatles fan in the very near future in 1968.
You brought up a memory for me. When I was at summer camp back in the mid 2000s or so, there was a kid with an iPod who had the White Album on it, and all the kids in the bunk would take turns at night listening to Revolution 9. Oh my god, it's so scary, all these scary noises on it. Fast forward to today, it's all just gobbledygook to me. I hate that song so much. That's my least favorite Beatles thing ever. It's not even really a song, it's a sound collage. But still, sure. I can't stand it. I always skip it whenever I'm listening to, you know, the White Album or whatever. You know, it's not my cup of tea, for sure, JoJo.
Yeah, I can't tell you. I mean, sometimes I'll just throw the record, literally the record, right? Throw it on, and I'm not going to skip songs on a record. But if I'm listening to it digitally, I'm skipping it for sure.
Yeah. All right, so my final pick here, a little album that we've brought up before, but this is the first song we're playing off of it. Little album called Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Kind of lost to time, bit obscure. No one really knows about it. I went with the last track on the album here. This is A Day in the Life.
I read the news today, oh boy. 4,000 holes in Blackburn, Lancashire. And though the holes were rather small, they had to count them all. Now they know how many holes it takes to fill the outer hole.
So before I ever heard that song, I would see these like snippets online where it's like A Day in the Life, the best Beatles song ever. And then I heard it and I thought, okay, that is not what I expected the best Beatles song ever to sound like, because it is like the Voltron of, latter half Beatles songs. Strange lyrics inspired by real events, drug innuendo, there's harmonies, there's multiple sections, sound effects, an orchestra. It is a wild collection of things in this song with the most frenetic, just like scary sounding crescendo like you'll ever hear in your life. And they do it twice. And then the second one ends with that one piano chord played on multiple instruments at once that they just hold on and they boost the volume. So as it goes on, you keep hearing it as it fades out. So much so that at the end, you can hear like a chair squeaking and papers rustling. It was like that, boosted up. This thing is wild, and there's so much going on. It should not work, but somehow it does. It's that Beatles magic, JoJo.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is, like, when you strip all that stuff away, all the production, right, you have, like, a sweet little acoustic ballad and, a little pop jaunt that's slapped in the middle, right? But the ability of, the band and the people that worked on the record, George Martin and the people that we mentioned earlier, right, are able to create something that's more than just, strumming on an acoustic guitar and writing a quick little ditty, right? This is perhaps the most epic sounding song in their catalog. A perfect album closer before album closers were something that people thought about. And the vocal by John is just beautiful. His voice changed so much over the course of the Beatles. When you listen to Please Please Me, right, the famous story about Twist and Shout is that he only had like one more take because his vocal cords were fried, right, screaming at the top of his lungs, because that's what they were doing as a club band before that. And then to this like sweet, soft ballad, and a completely different character as a singer. It's a real testament to how great of a singer he was.
Mm-hmm. And it's indicative, I think, of the album as a whole, where they just put everything on it. Sgt. Pepper's doesn't sound like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which doesn't sound like She's Leaving Home, which doesn't sound like Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, which doesn't sound like When I'm 64, and so on. It's a hodgepodge of stuff that became the most celebrated album ever, really. And yeah, you mentioned like it being an album closer. There's no other way to end this album. You can only end this album with that final crescendo and the chord. Like, you can't put this on side 1, track 4, and then Fixing a Hole starts. Like, it would not work at all there, JoJo. That's for sure. So,
for sure, it is a perfect placement, and I think as a piece, Sgt. Pepper's is a really remarkable album. But I've got a question for you, Andrew. Because of that hype surrounding Sgt. Pepper's, when Rolling Stone was doing those greatest album lists for the first time or whatever, I think it got a little bit overhyped, right? We've both mentioned that it's not our favorite album. Where does it rank amongst Beatles albums for you? Is it in your top 3? Is it in your top 5? Where is it?
I think it's top 3. I think Abbey Road is number 1, and I think I might go Revolver number 2 and Sgt. Pepper's number 3. I think that's, at least nowadays, it might change and flip-flop or whatever, but I think those are the 3 that I always go to, with Rubber Soul as well, in the 4th spot, I think. But yeah, I think that's my stance on it. Like, yeah, not my favorite album, but also it's Sgt. Pepper's. Like, how can you have it lower than, all these other albums? But that's where I stand on it anyway, right now. But what about you? Is it high on your list, in the middle? Where is it at?
It's high on my list, but I would say it's probably number 4.
Okay.
So I would say number 1A and 1B are Revolver and Rubber Soul. I would put Abbey Road 3, and I would put Sgt. Pepper's 4.
Okay. I mean, again, we're talking like, some of the best albums ever.
Yeah,
so we're,
for sure.
We're splitting hairs a little bit, I guess. But
yeah, that being said, that like, my top 8 albums of all time are probably all Beatles records, right? So it's splitting hairs at this point. But yeah, I think when it's the thing I talked about, right? Where because they're the Beatles, right? So much thought is put into, everything about them that, and because of the time that's passed, right? That, it's fun to have these like what if and, what's your favorite type of discussion, because I think everybody has their own favorites.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, that was our list of music there. That was the episode. JoJo, thank you so much for being here. I expected you to come prepared, but you went above and beyond, my friend. It's funny, when I started doing the remix format, I was like, I'm just going to keep things casual, not get too in the weeds with things, but I think the fact that we went 2 hours here and all of our just deep talking points, we did not keep it casual. We can't help it. Our music nerddom is too powerful, I think, JoJo. Yeah,
I mean, like I said, the Beatles are my main hobby, right? Like it's something that's been part of my life for over 30 years, and something that I literally think about every day, which is crazy. So I think we did the group justice, and this time flew, and like you said, we could have spent a lot more time. So thanks so much for having me on. And I think back to, I got to talk about all Japan wrestling themes with you and the Beatles. That's like right. Literally my 2 favorite types of music. So thank you so much for having me on this one, Andrew.
Anytime, of course, anytime. You're welcome. Any plugs you want to give? Go right ahead.
Let It Be Naked, right? I think that's the plug that I want to give. That one might have gone under the radar for people. Concert for George is great. The Get Back documentary, the Beatles anthology. The music is the music, right? But there's all this video footage too that, to me, enhances it so much. To hear Paul talk about his experiences, to see, great musicians like Tom Petty and Billy Preston and Jeff Lynne and Eric Clapton pay tribute to George, right? Go deep on the Beatles, get into the solo stuff, and as if the Beatles needed any plugging, that's what I would like to do.
Yeah, you will not be wanting for content with the Beatles. You can listen to your heart's content out there for sure. But okay, yes. So, Music of the Mat remix, of course, on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, voicesofwrestling.com for all of the other shows, previews, reviews, things like that. Social media at Music of the Mat on Twitter and Blue Sky, at Just Andrew on Blue Sky. If you want to leave a comment about this episode or share your favorite Beatles picks, voicesofwrestling.com/Discord. And, of course, make sure you subscribe on Apple, Spotify, your podcast player of choice. Leave a nice rating and review. Okay, let's go out with a play-out song here. Again, I could have thrown a dart at a board and just picked any song out there, really, because there's so much to choose from. But let's go with another song from Sgt. Pepper's. This is a song called Getting Better. Thanks again, JoJo.
Thanks, Andrew. Good talking to you.
It's getting better all the time. I used to get mad at my school. The teachers that taught me weren't cool. They're holding me down, turning me round, filling me up with your rules. I've got to admit, it's getting better. A little better all the time. I have to admit, it's getting better. It's getting better since you've been mine. We used to be angry young man, we hiding the head in the sand. You gave me the word, I finally heard. You're doing the best that I can. I've got to admit, it's getting better. A little better all the time.
Music of the Mat is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. The songs used throughout this show are property of their respective copyright holders.
Hello, Voices of Wrestling listener. Dave Ryan here. Have you ever wondered to yourself how many hidden gems are hidden away inside the last years of World Championship Wrestling? Have you ever asked yourself how many tenuous gags can be made about the name Mike Enos? And have you ever thought about what it sounds like for two Irishmen to interpret a very chaotic company through its B show? The answers to all this and more are just a click away. Check out Days of Thunder every second Thursday on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.